I used to believe that cheating happened to other women. You know the ones I'm talking about. The wives whose husbands suddenly started going to the gym 5 nights a week. The women who ignored lipstick stains on collars and mysterious late-night phone calls. I watched those stories on YouTube while folding laundry and always thought the same thing. I would have noticed. I was wrong. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment my marriage began falling apart. The problem was, I didn't realize it until almost 2 years later. My name is Emily. I'm 34 years old, and until last spring I believed I had the kind of marriage people secretly envied. My husband, Daniel, and I had been together for 11 years, married for 8 and no children, not because we didn't want them, but because life kept getting in the way. There was always another promotion, another move, another medical procedure. Another reason to wait. Daniel worked as a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company. His job required travel. At least that's what he always told me. Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas. Sometimes he'd be gone for 3 or 4 days, sometimes only overnight. I never questioned it. I trusted him completely. Trust is funny. You don't notice it when it's there. You only understand how valuable it was after someone destroys it. Our friends called us relationship goals. We never argued in public. We hosted Thanksgiving every year. We took beach vacations every summer. We posted smiling anniversary pictures online. People saw the photographs. They didn't see the empty spaces between them. Daniel had become distant. Not cruel. Not cold. Just unavailable. He kissed me goodbye every morning. He remembered birthdays. He asked about my day, but every conversation felt rehearsed, like we were reading lines we'd memorized years ago. I blamed stress. He blamed work. Neither of us blamed the truth. Then came his 37th birthday. I wanted to surprise him. Daniel had mentioned months earlier that he'd always wanted one particular luxury watch. Nothing flashy. Just elegant. Classic. The kind of watch someone buys once and keeps forever. It cost almost $4,000, far more than I normally spent on gifts. So I quietly started saving. I skipped lunches out with co-workers, canceled my salon appointments, sold a few designer handbags, collecting dust in my closet. For nearly 6 months, every extra dollar went into a hidden envelope inside my dresser. I imagined the look on his face, the hug, maybe tears. Maybe he'd finally realize how much I loved him. It's embarrassing now. The effort I put into making a cheating husband happy. The jewelry store wrapped the watch in a navy blue box tied with a silver ribbon. It looked perfect. On the drive home, Daniel called. "Hey, Em." His voice sounded rushed. "Something came up." "What happened?" "I have to fly to Denver first thing tomorrow morning." I frowned. "But tomorrow is your birthday." "I know. I'll celebrate when I get back." He laughed softly. "That's what adults do." I glanced at the gift box on the passenger seat. "When will you be home?" "Probably Sunday night." It was Thursday. So, 4 days? Maybe. "I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too." Those words would echo in my head for months, because they sounded sincere. That's what made the betrayal hurt so much. He wasn't pretending. At least not in that moment. He simply believed he could love 2 lives at the same time. The next morning I woke before sunrise to drive him to the airport. He kissed my forehead, thanked me for getting up so early, pulled his suitcase from the trunk, then disappeared through the sliding glass doors. I watched until I couldn't see him anymore. Then I drove home. Around noon I realized he'd forgotten his iPad. It was sitting on the kitchen counter. I smiled. Typical Daniel. He forgot something almost every trip. I plugged it into charge before shipping it overnight to his hotel. That's when the screen lit up. A notification appeared. Not a text, not an email. A shared photo album. The preview showed a little girl with curly brown hair holding a birthday cake. Across the top were 6 words that changed my life forever. "Happy birthday, Daddy. We miss you." I stared at the screen. Daddy. Daniel and I didn't have children. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it belonged to a co-worker. Maybe someone sent it by mistake. Maybe. Then another notification appeared. This one from a woman named Claire. Lily cried herself to sleep. She really wanted you here today. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the iPad. I still wasn't thinking affair. I was thinking something stranger. Some distant relative. Some charity. Some misunderstanding. Anything except the truth. Because the truth was too impossible. Too ugly. Too final. I unlocked the device. Daniel had given me the passcode years earlier. He'd never bothered changing it. The photo album opened automatically. Hundreds of pictures, Christmas mornings, pumpkin patches, school plays, birthday parties, beach vacations, and in every single photograph, there was my husband, holding the little girl's hand, blowing out candles beside her, teaching her to ride a bicycle, kissing the woman named Claire. Not hidden, not secret, not stolen moments. They looked like a family, a real one. I checked the dates. 3 years. 3 years of photographs. 3 years. While he was still married to me, I kept scrolling, hoping to find something that proved I misunderstood. Instead, I found a picture taken just 2 weeks earlier. Daniel stood in front of a beautiful white house, his arm wrapped around Claire. The little girl sat on his shoulders laughing. The caption underneath read, "Home at last." I whispered one sentence into the empty kitchen. Who's home? People always ask why I didn't call him the second I found those pictures. Why I didn't scream. Why I didn't pack my bags. The answer is simple. Because my heart refused to believe what my eyes had already proven. I sat in my kitchen for almost an hour with Daniel's iPad lying in front of me. The screen had gone dark. I never touched it. I just stared at my reflection. My face looked exactly the same. Same brown hair, same tired eyes, same woman who had kissed her husband goodbye at the airport only a few hours earlier, except she didn't exist anymore. I kept hearing his voice in my head. Love you. He'd said it so naturally. Not like a guilty man. Not like someone afraid of being caught, just normal. That was the part I couldn't understand. How do you kiss your wife goodbye in the morning and spend the evening with another family? I wanted someone to tell me the photos were fake, that someone had stolen his identity, that I was having some kind of breakdown. Anything except the obvious answer, because once something becomes obvious, you can never unknow it. I finally picked up the iPad again. This time, I forced myself to slow down. No assumptions. Just facts. I'm an accountant. Numbers have always made more sense to me than emotions. So I treated the situation like an audit. Find the evidence. Ignore the feelings. The first thing I noticed was the dates. The earliest picture was almost exactly 3 years old. Daniel stood beside a blonde woman outside a pumpkin patch. She was laughing. He had his arm around her waist. Nothing about the picture looked secretive. If someone had shown it to me without context, I would have assumed they were husband and wife. I kept scrolling. Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Valentine's Day, birthdays, family barbecues, trips to the zoo, school plays. It wasn't an affair. Affairs happen in hotel rooms. This looked like a life. A complete one. Then I started paying attention to Daniel, not the people around him. Him. I'd spent 11 years studying that face. I knew every version of his smile. The polite smile for neighbors, the fake smile for office parties, the exhausted smile after long flights. But the smile in these pictures, I hadn't seen it in years. It wasn't forced. It wasn't polite. He looked happy. Really happy. I felt something inside me crack. Not because he'd smiled, because I couldn't remember the last time he'd smiled like that with me. My phone rang. His name lit up across the screen. Daniel. For a second I considered ignoring it. Instead, I answered, "Hey, beautiful, the same nickname he'd used for almost a decade. Did your flight land? Just got to Denver. Denver. I looked back at a picture clearly tagged in Colorado Springs. A lie. So casual he probably didn't even think about it anymore. Everything okay? He asked. You sound quiet. I'm just tired. You should get some rest. He laughed softly. I'll make it up to you this weekend. I almost asked him. Who's Claire? Who's Lily? Whose house is that? Instead I heard myself say, okay, I love you. There was a long pause before I answered. Love you too. The words tasted like someone else's. When the call ended, I realized my hands were shaking. Not from anger, from confusion. Because I still loved him, and somehow that hurt more than the betrayal itself. I opened the Photos app again. The little girl appeared over and over. Curly brown hair, tiny freckles across her nose. She couldn't have been older than 4. Every picture with Daniel looked effortless. He was tying her shoes, helping her build a snowman, reading bedtime stories, holding her asleep on his shoulder. I whispered something before I could stop myself. You really are her dad. The realization hit me so suddenly that I had to sit down again. Whatever relationship Daniel had with Claire, this little girl believed he was her father, whether biologically or not. She loved him, and he loved her. There was no pretending in those pictures. Then something else caught my attention. Almost every album had a location attached. Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs. I frowned. Daniel always told me he stayed in Denver for work. Why would every family picture be 70 miles away? Unless Denver had never been the destination. It had only been the excuse. I stood up and walked into Daniel's home office. Most people would have searched for love letters or hidden phones. I looked for paperwork. Daniel hated clutter. Every receipt, every itinerary, every boarding pass ended up in one drawer waiting for his monthly expense report. I opened it. Hundreds of folded receipts, gas stations, hotels, airports, restaurants, everything neatly stacked. I spent nearly an hour sorting them by state. Colorado. The dates matched his business trips. Then I found one receipt that made my stomach turn. A grocery store, milk, apple juice, frozen waffles, chicken nuggets, princess band-aids, children's cough syrup. None of those things belonged in a business expense folder. They belonged in a kitchen. Someone's kitchen. I leaned against his desk. For the first time all day, I stopped looking for evidence. I already had enough. What I wanted now was to know where he'd been going and who he'd been going home to. By the time the sun disappeared outside our kitchen window, I had made one decision. I wasn't going to confront Daniel over the phone. Not yet. If there really was another family, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Not because I enjoyed pain, because once I looked him in the face, there would be no going back. And before I destroyed the life I'd spent 11 years building, I needed to know exactly whose life he had built without me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same photograph. Daniel kneeling beside a little girl as she laughed, one tiny hand resting on his shoulder. I'd always imagined what he would look like as a father. I'd pictured him teaching our own child how to ride a bike, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories. Somehow, those dreams hadn't disappeared. He had simply given them to someone else. By 6 o'clock the next morning, I'd made up my mind. If Daniel really had another family, I wasn't going to discover it through photographs. I was going to see it myself. My flight landed in Colorado Springs just after noon. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel had told me he was in Denver. Yet here I was, standing in the city that kept appearing in every photo album. I rented the cheapest gray sedan the airport had available. The young man behind the counter smiled as he handed me the keys. Vacation? I almost laughed. You could call it that. He wished me a pleasant stay. If only he knew. I opened the location information attached to one of the photos. It wasn't an exact address, just a neighborhood. Still, it was enough. Tree-lined streets, small parks, children riding bicycles, the kind of suburb where people waved at each other while watering their lawns. It looked ordinary, painfully ordinary. I drove slowly through the neighborhood, trying not to attract attention. Every white house made my heart race. Every blonde woman walking her dog looked like Claire from a distance. I felt ridiculous, like someone playing detective in a life that no longer belonged to her. Then I saw it, the porch, the blue shutters, the maple tree in the front yard. I'd seen all three in dozens of photographs. This was the house. I parked half a block away. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the steering wheel just to steady them. The front yard was full of toys, a pink scooter, a soccer ball, sidewalk chalk. Someone had drawn colorful flowers across the driveway. A child's laughter drifted through an open window. I wasn't prepared for how normal it felt. No secret mansion. No hidden apartment. Just a family home. At exactly 2:17 p.m. A black SUV turned onto the street. My breath caught instantly. Daniel. He pulled into the driveway like he'd done it 100 times before. Maybe 1,000. The garage door opened before he even stopped the car. Someone inside had been waiting for him. The driver's door swung open. Daniel stepped out wearing the same navy jacket he'd left home in yesterday morning, except he looked different, lighter, relaxed. There wasn't the exhausted businessman I'd kissed goodbye. There was a man coming home. The front door burst open. The little girl ran outside. "Daddy," her tiny voice carried all the way down the street. Daniel bent down and caught her in his arms before she could reach him. She wrapped both legs around his waist. He laughed, not the polite laugh he used around clients, a real one, the kind that came from somewhere deep inside. "I missed you, Peanut. I made you a picture. I can't wait to see it." He kissed the top of her head. Then Claire walked outside. She smiled at him the way wives smile at husbands who have finally come home after a long trip. She leaned in and kissed him, not passionately, comfortably, like they'd done it every day for years. Daniel slipped his arm around her waist without thinking, without hesitation, without guilt. The three of them walked into the house together. The door closed behind them. I realized I hadn't taken a single breath. I don't know how long I sat there. 5 minutes. Maybe 30. Time stopped making sense. People walked dogs past my car. Neighbors waved at each other. A mail carrier drove by. The entire world continued as if mine hadn't just ended. Eventually, my phone buzzed. "Daniel." I stared at his name until it almost stopped ringing. Then I answered. "Hey," he said cheerfully. "How's your day?" I looked at the house in front of me. "I've been thinking about you." "So have I. You should see this hotel," he continued. "They upgraded me to a suite." A suite. I watched him through the living room window as he sat on a couch beside Claire. Lily climbed into his lap holding a coloring book. He wasn't in a hotel. He wasn't even pretending to work. He was helping a little girl color a princess castle. "I wish you were here," he said. Those words hit harder than anything else. Not because they were lies, because he said them so easily, as though the truth had never existed. "I have to go," I whispered. "Everything okay?" "Yeah. I love you." I closed my eyes. For the first time in 11 years. I couldn't say it back. I ended the call without another word. The sun was beginning to set when something unexpected happened. A silver pickup truck pulled into the driveway. An older man climbed out, late 60s, gray hair, broad shoulders. The moment Lily saw him, she sprinted outside. "Grandpa." He scooped her up effortlessly, laughing as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Then he looked toward the house. Daniel stepped onto the porch. The older man's smile disappeared. He didn't hug Daniel. He didn't shake his hand. He barely acknowledged him. Instead, they exchanged a few quiet words I couldn't hear. The conversation lasted less than a minute. The older man turned and walked back toward his truck. Daniel remained on the porch, watching him leave. His shoulders had stiffened. Whatever had just happened. It wasn't friendly. I didn't know who that man was, but I knew one thing. He wasn't happy to see Daniel, and for the first time since arriving in Colorado, I realized someone else might already know the truth. Maybe I wasn't the only person who had been lied to. I didn't leave. Every reasonable part of my brain told me to start the car and drive away. I'd already seen enough. Daniel had another family. There wasn't anything left to prove. But I couldn't move. I stayed parked across the street until the sun disappeared behind the rooftops. Lights came on inside the house one by one. The kitchen, the living room, the upstairs bedroom. It looked warm, comfortable, lived in. I hated myself for noticing those things. Because for years I'd imagined Daniel spending lonely evenings in anonymous hotel rooms while I waited for him at home. Instead, he had been coming here. Dinner. Movie nights. Bedtime stories. I watched silhouettes move past the windows. Claire setting the table, Lily chasing their golden retriever through the living room, Daniel carrying a stack of plates into the kitchen like he'd done it 1,000 times before. He knew where everything belonged. That realization hurt more than the kiss I'd seen earlier. He wasn't visiting. He lived here. At least part of the time. Around 7 o'clock. I finally started the car. I booked a room at a motel 10 minutes away. It wasn't much. A faded blue sign, a bed that squeaked every time I sat down. An air conditioner that sounded like it might explode. But I barely noticed. I spent the entire night staring at the ceiling. One question kept circling my mind. Who was Claire? Did she know about me? Or was she another victim? If she believed Daniel was divorced, then she'd been living inside a lie too. I needed answers. The next morning, I returned to the neighborhood just after 8. Daniel's SUV was gone. My heart sank. Had he already left for the airport? Was I too late? Then the garage door opened. Claire backed out in a silver crossover. Lily sat in the back seat, waving a stuffed rabbit in the air. Claire kissed her daughter's forehead before driving away. School drop-off. Another perfectly ordinary morning. I waited until they disappeared around the corner. The house was empty. At least I hoped it was. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was anger. Maybe desperation. Maybe I simply couldn't stand another minute without knowing the truth. Before I had time to think, I was already walking up the front path. Every step felt heavier than the last. The flower beds were freshly planted. Someone had hung a small wooden sign beside the front door. Home is where love lives. I almost laughed. Instead, I knocked once, twice, and no answer. I turned to leave. Then I heard footsteps. The door opened just a few inches. An older man stood there. The same man I'd seen the evening before. Gray hair, blue work shirt, deep lines around his eyes. He looked at me for exactly 3 seconds. Then he sighed. I wondered how long it would take. I froze. I'm sorry. Do I know you? He opened the door wider. Emily. My blood ran cold. You know my name? I've known your name for 3 years. I couldn't speak. The world suddenly felt tilted. How could this stranger know who I was? He studied my face with something that looked painfully close to guilt. I was hoping you'd never have to find out like this. My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Who are you? He looked over his shoulder to make sure the house was empty. Then he stepped aside. My name is Robert. I'm Claire's father. I felt my knees weaken. I think. He paused. You should come inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Family photos covered the walls. Some included Daniel. Some didn't. Robert led me to the kitchen. He poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. Neither of us touched them. For almost a full minute, the room was silent. Finally, I spoke. Does Claire know I'm his wife? Robert closed his eyes. No, the answer hit me like a punch. She believes Daniel's divorce was finalized years ago. I stared at him. What? He told us he was married once. Robert's voice was calm, almost tired. He said the marriage ended before he met Claire. He said there were no children. He said you both had moved on. I felt every bit of air leave my lungs. So, she's been lied to. Yes. And you've known? Robert nodded slowly. Not at first. When I found out the truth, he looked down at his hands. Double quotes. It was already too late. I leaned forward. How long have you known? His answer came so quietly I almost missed it. About a year. A year? I hired a private investigator. I stared at him. You what? I never trusted Daniel. The room fell silent again. I wanted proof before I accused him. He reached into the cabinet above the refrigerator. Then he pulled down a thick manila folder. My heart skipped a beat. It looked worn. Heavy. Packed with papers. Photographs, receipts, copies of documents. He placed it gently on the kitchen table between us. I've been waiting for the right person to give this to. I looked from the folder to Robert. What is it? He met my eyes. Everything. I hesitated before placing my hand on the folder. The paper felt cold beneath my fingers. I had come to Colorado believing I'd uncover an affair. Instead, I was sitting in another woman's father's kitchen, holding evidence that suggested my husband had been living an even bigger lie than I could have imagined. I slowly opened the folder. The very first page made my stomach turn. It wasn't a photograph. It wasn't a receipt. It was a marriage certificate. And Daniel's name was on it. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to touch the paper. My fingers hovered over the folder while Robert quietly sipped his coffee. Neither of us spoke. I kept staring at Daniel's name. It looked wrong, not because it wasn't his, because it was. The same signature I'd seen on our mortgage. The same handwriting on birthday cards. The same man. Just attached to a different life. Finally, I looked up. When did they get married? Robert didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid the certificate closer to me. Read the date. I did. Then I read it again. Then a third time. The room seemed to tilt. The wedding had taken place 18 months ago. 18 months. I did the math automatically. Daniel and I had celebrated our 7th wedding anniversary just 3 months before that. He'd taken me to Napa Valley, bought me flowers, posted a picture of us online with the caption, 7 years down, forever to go. 3 months later, he married another woman. Without divorcing me. I looked at Robert. This isn't possible. I wish I could tell you it wasn't. He can't legally marry someone while he's already married. Robert nodded. I know. So how? He used another identity. The words hung in the air. What? I didn't believe it either. He reached into the folder and handed me a photocopy of a driver's license. The photograph was unmistakably Daniel. The name wasn't. David Mercer. Different last name. Different birth date. Same face. Same smile. Same man. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Is this fake? It appears to be very convincing. How did he? I don't know. Robert rubbed his temples. The investigator believes he spent years creating it. My heartbeat quickened. This wasn't just cheating. This wasn't one bad decision. This had taken planning. Months. Maybe years. Daniel hadn't stumbled into another relationship. He'd built another identity. Robert opened the folder again. There are more things you need to see. I wasn't sure I wanted to, but I nodded. He handed me copies of utility bills, mortgage statements, insurance documents, everything listed the same name. David Mercer. The address matched his house. He bought this place 2 years ago, Robert said. I looked around the kitchen, the polished hardwood floors, the family calendar hanging on the refrigerator, Lily's drawings attached with colorful magnets. Daniel hadn't been visiting. He'd been paying for this home, supporting this family, building a future. While I waited for him every Thursday night, believing he was entertaining clients somewhere across the country, I swallowed hard. Claire has no idea. Robert shook his head. She believes she's legally married. She wears a wedding ring. She introduces him as her husband. He paused. And she loves him. There was no anger in his voice, only sadness. That surprised me. If anyone had a reason to hate Daniel, it was the man sitting across from me. Instead, he looked exhausted. I flipped through another stack of documents. Bank statements, school enrollment papers, medical insurance. Then I stopped. There, clipped neatly behind the others, was a page from Lily's preschool. Father's name: David Mercer. Emergency contact. Authorized pickup. Parent's signature. Daniel had signed every form, every permission slip, every school event, every parent-teacher conference. He hadn't just pretended to be a father. He had become one. I pressed my hand against my mouth. I don't even know who my husband is. Robert looked at me with genuine sympathy. I don't think either of us does. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence was an awkward. It was heavy, the kind of silence shared by two people who suddenly realize they've both been standing in the same burning house. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me since yesterday. Why are you helping me? Robert leaned back in his chair. Because I have a daughter. His voice cracked slightly. And because I watched my wife spend 32 years married to a man who lied about everything. I looked at him. My father. He had another family too. I blinked. Robert gave a bitter smile. I promised myself I'd never let my daughter waste half her life loving someone who never truly existed. So why didn't you tell her? I tried. What happened? He always had another explanation. Another business trip. Another document. Another convincing lie. Claire believed him because she wanted to, just like you believed him. He wasn't accusing me. He was stating a painful fact, and he was right. I had believed every late flight, every canceled anniversary dinner, every missed holiday, because trusting my husband had always been easier than imagining the alternative. Robert stood and walked toward the window. They're due back in about an hour. I felt my stomach tighten. You mean Claire? He nodded. If she sees you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everything would explode. Not just my marriage, Lily's world, Claire's life. Every lie Daniel had spent years constructing would collapse in a single afternoon. I looked down at the folder. I don't want that little girl to get hurt. Robert sighed. Neither do I. For the first time since I'd arrived in Colorado, I cried, not because of Daniel, not because of the lies, because somewhere nearby, a 4-year-old little girl believed she had the perfect family, and before this was over, someone was going to have to tell her the truth. I wiped my eyes and carefully closed the folder. I need copies. Robert smiled faintly. I already made them. He reached beneath the table and handed me a second folder. Every document, every photograph, every report from the private investigator. Organized. Labeled. Ready. You were expecting me. I was hoping you'd come. I slipped the folder into my bag, then something caught my attention. A yellow envelope rested at the very bottom. No label. No notes. Just one sealed envelope. What's this? Robert's expression changed immediately. He looked away. I haven't opened it. Why not? It arrived 3 weeks ago. From who? He looked directly at me. It was addressed to you. I frowned. To me? It was mailed here by mistake. My name. My full name. Written across the front in neat block letters. No return address. No stamp from a business. Just an ordinary envelope. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. 500 words. He isn't lying about everything. There was no signature. No explanation. Nothing else. Just those 5 words. And suddenly, the mystery became even bigger than I had imagined. I read the note at least 10 times. He isn't lying about everything. 5 words. No signature. No explanation. Just enough to make me question everything I'd learned over the last 24 hours. Robert watched my face carefully. I've wondered every day who sent it. You really never opened it?" He shook his head. "It wasn't addressed to me." I turned the envelope over. Nothing. No return address. No postmark I recognized. Just my name written in neat black ink. Who knew I would come here? Who even knew this house existed? More importantly, who wanted me to believe Daniel wasn't lying about everything? Because he had certainly lied about enough. "I need to ask you something," I said. Robert nodded. "Go ahead. Does Claire know Daniel's real birthday?" He frowned. "I think so." "What date does she celebrate?" He thought for a moment. "April 17th. My heart skipped. That was Daniel's birthday. So he didn't change that. Robert looked confused. Why would he? I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the investigator's report. For the first time, I read it from the beginning instead of flipping through random pages. Former employer, vehicle registrations, airline records, property records, photographs, phone records. Everything was carefully organized. The investigator had been thorough, very thorough. Then one paragraph caught my attention. Subject regularly travels under both identities but never allows the two households to overlap. No evidence either woman has knowingly participated in the deception. I looked up. So the investigator believed Claire was innocent. Robert nodded. He was certain. That made two of us. I spent another hour reading every page. The deeper I went, the stranger the story became. Daniel wasn't reckless. He was methodical. Every trip, every excuse, every hotel reservation, every plane ticket, everything was planned months in advance. He had separate credit cards, separate email accounts, separate insurance policies. He even had 2 cell phones, one for each life. I should have been furious. Instead, I found myself admiring the terrifying amount of discipline it must have taken, not because it was impressive, because it was horrifying. People don't maintain lies like this by accident. They build them, brick by brick, year after year. Robert broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "When did you first suspect him?" I almost laughed. "Yesterday." He stared. "You never noticed?" I noticed he was tired. I smiled sadly. I noticed canceled vacations. I noticed late-night emails. I noticed he forgot anniversaries. I looked around the kitchen. I just thought marriage got harder. Robert sighed. My daughter said almost the exact same thing. Neither of us spoke after that. Around noon, Robert's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. "Claire." He answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart." His voice softened. I heard Lily laughing somewhere in the background. "Grandpa, I'll be there tonight, Peanut." He smiled. "I can't wait either." When he ended the call, neither of us said anything. The silence carried its own meaning. That little girl had no idea 2 strangers were sitting in her kitchen discussing the collapse of her family. "I should go," I finally said. Robert walked me to the front door. Before I stepped outside, he stopped me. "Emily." I turned around. "If you confront Daniel." He hesitated. "Don't do it here." I knew why. Lily. She deserved better than watching her father exposed in her own living room. I promise. He extended his hand. Instead, I hugged him. It surprised both of us. We weren't family. We weren't friends. We were simply 2 people who had been deceived by the same man. Back at the motel, I spread every document across the bed: marriage certificate, bank statements, photographs, investigators' reports, phone records, the anonymous note. Something still bothered me. If Daniel had gone to such extraordinary lengths to hide his double life, why leave his iPad at home? He never forgot electronics, ever. He once drove 40 miles back to the house because he'd forgotten a charger, but this time, he'd left behind the one device connected to his private photo albums. It didn't fit. I replayed the previous morning in my head. He'd been calm, unhurried. He'd packed carefully, checked his pockets, checked his passport, checked his wallet, then somehow forgot the iPad. No, that wasn't right. A cold feeling settled over me. What if he hadn't forgotten it? What if he'd left it where I would find it? The thought was absurd. Unless someone had forced his hand. I picked up the investigator's report again. Near the end was a list of recent observations. One line had been highlighted in yellow. Subject appears increasingly anxious during recent surveillance. Frequently checks mirrors while driving. Alters routines without explanation. Someone had been watching Daniel. Not just the investigator. Someone else. My phone vibrated an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Hello. Silence. Then a woman's voice, barely above a whisper. You found the folder. Every muscle in my body tightened. Who is this? You don't have much time. What are you talking about? He knows. The line crackled. He knows you've been to Colorado. My heart slammed against my ribs. Who knows? There was a pause, then she said something that made every hair on my arm stand up. Don't go home. The call disconnected. I stared at the screen. No caller, no number to call back. Nothing. I rushed to the motel window. Across the parking lot, a black SUV sat idling. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. As I watched, its headlights slowly turn toward my room. And then, the engine began to move. The black SUV rolled slowly across the motel parking lot. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't trying to hide. It simply moved at walking pace until it stopped 3 spaces away from my rental car. The engine kept running. My pulse was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stood perfectly still behind the curtain. Don't move. Don't let whoever's inside know you're watching. A few seconds later, the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, not Daniel. He looked to be in his late 40s, wearing jeans, a navy windbreaker, and a baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like someone's neighbor, which somehow made him even more unsettling. He glanced toward my room, then toward my rental car. Instead of approaching either one, he walked over to a vending machine, bought a bottle of water, climbed back into the SUV, and drove away. I waited another 10 minutes before breathing normally again. Maybe it had been nothing. Maybe I was becoming paranoid. After everything I'd discovered, every stranger suddenly looked suspicious. Still, I wasn't taking any chances. I carried the investigator's file into the bathroom and locked the door behind me. The folder lay open across the sink. I forced myself to think logically. Someone had called me. Someone knew I'd been at Robert's house. Someone warned me not to return home. That left only a handful of possibilities. Either Daniel had discovered I was in Colorado, or someone else had been following both of us. Neither possibility made me feel any better. I picked up my phone and called Robert. He answered on the second ring. Emily, did anyone come by the house after I left? There was a pause. No, are you sure? Yes. Why? I told him about the anonymous phone call, then about the SUV. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he was silent. Finally, he said, Stay where you are. I don't think that's a good idea. It isn't. But don't come here. You think Daniel knows? I don't know what Daniel knows anymore. His voice sounded different now. Less certain. More worried. Listen to me carefully. I'm listening. If anyone asks, you've never met me. What? You heard me. The words sent a chill through me. Robert. I'll call you later. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. Something had changed. The calm, thoughtful man I'd spent the morning with was suddenly frightened, which meant whatever was happening, he understood it better than I did. I couldn't stay in the motel, even if the SUV had been a coincidence. I no longer felt safe. I packed everything into my suitcase, every document, every photograph. The anonymous note. Before leaving, I checked the room one last time, then something caught my eye. The navy blue gift box, Daniel's birthday watch. I had forgotten all about it. For a long moment I simply looked at it. 6 months of saving. 6 months of skipped lunches. 6 months of believing I was buying a gift for the men I loved. Now it looked absurd. I almost threw it in the trash instead. I slipped it into my bag, not because Daniel deserved it, because it reminded me of who I had been before all of this, a woman who trusted completely. I wasn't sure she'd ever exist again. Rather than book another motel, I drove to a busy shopping center on the other side of town. People filled the parking lot. Families pushed shopping carts. Teenagers laughed outside a movie theater. Normal life. I parked near the entrance and sat there, watching people. It grounded me. The world hadn't stopped, only mine had. My phone buzzed. Not a call. A text, unknown number. Check your trunk before you drive. My blood froze. I looked in every mirror. And no one seemed to be watching me. Cars came and went. Children ran toward an ice cream shop. Everything looked ordinary. I climbed out of the driver's seat. Every step toward the trunk felt heavier than the last. My hands trembled as I pressed the release button. The trunk slowly lifted. It was empty. Almost. Near the spare tire sat a small white envelope. My name was written across the front. Emily. And no last name. Just Emily. I looked around again. Still nothing. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me standing across the street from Claire's house yesterday afternoon. The picture had been taken from behind, from a distance. I turned it over. On the back, written in black marker, were 7 words. You aren't the first wife to look. For several seconds I couldn't process what I was reading. The first wife. Not the other wife. The first wife. I read it again. Then again. Someone wasn't talking about Claire. Someone was talking about another woman. Before me. Or before Claire. Or someone I knew nothing about. My phone rang. A known number. I answered immediately. Who are you? A man's voice replied. Calm. Measured. Stop looking for Daniel. Who is this? If you keep digging. He paused. You're going to discover something much worse than an affair. What does that mean? You think your husband has been living 2 lives. Another pause. Then he quietly said, Emily, you're counting the wrong number. The call disconnected. I stood beside my rental car, gripping the photograph so tightly it crumpled in my hand. 2 lives? No. According to the stranger. There were more. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wondered if I had ever truly known the man I'd married. I didn't answer another unknown number after that. I turned my phone off. For the first time in nearly 48 hours, I stopped chasing clues. I sat in my rental car outside the shopping center as the sun began to set, surrounded by hundreds of strangers going about their ordinary lives. Families loaded groceries into SUVs, teenagers laughed over milkshakes. An elderly couple held hands as they crossed the parking lot. The world kept moving. Mine had stopped. The photograph lay in my lap. You aren't the first wife to look. I realized something. It didn't matter whether Daniel had 2 lives, or 3. Whether there had been another woman before Claire, or after me. One fact remained unchanged. The man I loved had never existed, only the version he wanted me to see. I drove back to the motel one last time. Not to stay. To think. My flight home left the next morning. I had enough evidence. Enough pain. Enough answers. Or so I thought. As I packed my suitcase, someone knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks. I looked through the peephole. Robert. I opened it immediately. He looked exhausted. You need to see this. He held up his phone. Claire was crying on the screen. She'd posted a message only 15 minutes earlier. Has anyone seen David? He left this morning and hasn't answered his phone. Lily is worried. I stared at the post. David. Not Daniel. She still didn't know. Robert looked at me. I confronted him. What? This afternoon. My stomach tightened. What happened? I told him I knew. And he denied everything. Of course he did. Robert shook his head. No, you don't understand. He denied being Daniel. I blinked. What? He looked me in the eyes and claimed he'd never heard that name for several seconds. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Robert handed me another piece of paper. A business card. Private investigator. I called him after I left you. He agreed to meet us. An hour later we sat inside a small office downtown. The investigator spread dozens of photographs across the desk. I've been doing this for 28 years. He pointed toward Daniel. I've never seen a case quite like this. I looked at the photographs. Some showed Daniel with Claire. Others showed him leaving airports, meeting clients, driving rental cars. Normal things. Then he slid one final photograph toward me. It showed Daniel. Alone. Standing in front of a grave. The headstone belonged to a woman. The inscription read, Beloved wife Sarah Mercer 1987202. I frowned. Who's Sarah? The investigator folded his hands. I believe. He paused. She was his sister. I waited. He continued. After months of digging, we couldn't find any evidence that Daniel had another wife before either of you. I looked at the anonymous photograph. The note said I wasn't the first wife. I know. We think it was written to frighten you. So there wasn't another wife? No, he leaned back. There were only two. You. And Claire. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The conspiracy I'd begun imagining didn't exist. There wasn't a network of hidden families. There wasn't a criminal mastermind. There wasn't a secret organization creating false identities. There was simply one man. A man willing to lie every single day for years. Sometimes the truth isn't complicated. It's just ugly. So what now? Robert asked. The investigator looked at me. That's your decision. I thought about revenge. About exposing him publicly. Calling his employer. Posting every document online. Walking into Claire's house with the marriage certificate. Every fantasy lasted only a few seconds. Then I pictured Lily, a little girl who loved a man she believed was her father. She hadn't lied to anyone. Neither had Claire. Neither had I. The only person who deserved consequences was Daniel. I don't want revenge. Robert looked surprised. I want the truth. The following morning, I asked Daniel to meet me halfway between the airport and our house. He arrived smiling. He leaned in to kiss me. I stepped backward. His smile faded. Emily? I placed two folders on the table, one in front of him, one in front of me. He looked at the first photograph, then the marriage certificate, then Robert's investigator reports. For the first time in 11 years, my husband had nothing to say. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He simply lowered his head. I never wanted either of you to get hurt. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. You spent years making sure that happened. Tears filled his eyes. I loved you. You loved being admired. You loved being needed. You loved never having to choose. Silence. Then I took the navy blue gift box from my bag. The watch. His voice cracked. You remembered. I did. I pushed it across the table. It's yours. He looked confused. I'm not giving it to you as a birthday present. I met his eyes one last time. I'm giving it to you because it's the last thing you'll ever receive from me. I stood. He reached for my hand. I stepped away. No, that single word ended 11 years. The divorce took almost 9 months. Daniel didn't fight it. He signed every paper. He sold our house. Half of everything legally became mine. I never asked Claire what happened afterward. Robert told me only one thing. She left him. Not immediately, but eventually. Lily still saw him. because whatever he'd done to the adults, he had been the only father she'd ever known. I respected Claire for making that decision. Children shouldn't carry the punishment for their parents' mistakes. A year later, I was sitting alone in a small coffee shop on a rainy Saturday morning. My lawyer called. The divorce is officially closed. I thanked her. Then I hung up. That was it. No dramatic music. No celebration. No grand speech. Just peace. I looked out the window as people hurried through the rain. For years, I'd believed the worst thing that could happen was discovering my husband had been unfaithful. I was wrong. The worst thing is losing yourself while trying to save someone who has no intention of being honest. The best thing is finding yourself again after they're gone. If you're listening to my story because something inside you feels wrong, don't ignore it. Trust doesn't mean refusing to see the truth. Love doesn't require you to explain away every lie. And if someone asks you to sacrifice your peace just to protect their secrets, walk away, because the right person will never ask you to live inside a lie. I did. Once. And I never will again.
Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.